we saw a baby hippo in the shallows. And I literally just got the words out of "where's mum?" And we drift and she pops up on the right and the baby's on the left and we've gone between us.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we fucked up.
Welcome to the Bucket List Life Podcast with Trav Bell, the world's #1 bucket list expert. Bucket List Life's mission is to help you get off the treadmill, stop Groundhog Days, hack your habits, and live a regret-free life. Because we know life's way too short not to live your bucket list life. So please welcome your host, Trav Bell, the Bucket List Guy.
Hey, bucket listers, and welcome to another episode of the Bucket List Life Podcast. I'm your host, Trav Bell, the Bucket List Guy, and I'm here with Sarah Davis. How are you, Sarah?
Excellent, thank you, Trav. Very happy to be here. How are you?
I'm very, very well. This is we've chatted before in a previous episode, and I'm really pumped to get an update and sort of refresh our new listeners and watchers about what you've been up to and what makes Sarah Davis tick. And in the last time you were leading up to a certain event, you've done said event now, you've got a truckload of learnings, and now you've got 2 or 3 others that you're on the cusp of getting done or in the middle of getting done. So look, I'll start off with the question, having traveled all around the world doing what you do, how would you fill in an incoming passenger card, as in occupation?
I like putting down adventurer because at my heart, that's what I love doing the most.
Adventurer.
It doesn't pay very well, but it's a lot of fun.
Oh, well, there you go. Fun first. And you literally put that down. And what does the customs say? Adventurer. What do you adventure?
They don't say anything.
No?
You just pass those cards over. I'm pretty sure they just go straight in the bin, to be honest.
True. Yeah. Unless you've got something dodgy to declare.
Yeah.
So when we spoke last, you were setting up to do this thing called Paddle the Nile. Yes, you heard it, ladies and gentlemen, Paddle the Nile. And I haven't got some... Yeah, check this out. I got the merch. I still wear it today. There we go. Paddle the Nile. Boom.
How good's that?
Yeah, that is a good jumper. So you paddled the Nile. Oh my God. And now you've done a book. And I want everyone who's listening and watching this to take some serious bucket list inspiration from what you've got to say here and share and the lessons learned and everything like that. Like, what was the impetus for paddling the Nile?
So you could say, I think possibly in a nutshell, it's the midlife crisis. The slightly longer version is I was in corporate, so in risk management, in banking, had a good career. It's one of those strengths, but definitely not a passion. And I kind of felt like the square peg being, rammed into the round hole and, contorting myself into this shape of almost like societal expectations of like, well, you do, you finish uni, you do the work. And it was just felt like this, it was like having a beautiful piece of clothing, but it didn't really suit me. And it wasn't really me. And I tried various things of, I spent a few years as a personal trainer and then got sucked back into banking. And then, got to a point in my sort of early to mid 40s and, had this point where I really just had a blank canvas ahead of me. And it's like, something's got to change. And I had this really great job. And it's like, corporate's not going to get any better than this. Amazing organization. I was at Macquarie. Loved it there, but it was still just not quite right. So I made a decision. It's so easy to say, I want to make a change. And working out what is that is so much harder. But, I started reading different things and looking at different things and then saw, I think it was a couple of documentaries and it was 2 adventurers. But what was super different about them, or to me anyway, what really struck me was I could see a bit of me in them. In other words, they seem like, ordinary people as opposed to, like the Bear Grylls types who you feel have been climbing mountains since they could walk. And it always just looks so like I would read the books about, adventurers and explorers. It hadn't occurred to me that I could actually do that. So when I saw these people, it wasn't just sparking my imagination. It was sparking that belief of like, oh, maybe this is something I could do. So it was like, great, what do I do? And paddling, is my sport. And so it's like, okay, I want to do something paddling. My ego really liked the idea of it being a first.
Talk to me about that. Come on.
So then a bit of Googling what hasn't been done. And at that point,
You literally Googled that. Like, what hasn't been done by a thing.
I was looking at paddling. So it's like, I was Googling, like, has someone paddled around Australia? Yes. Okay. Right. Okay. And then it's like, okay, what else could I do? And looked at the Nile. I was like, oh, yeah. Love Africa. That's my favorite place, continent wise to go to. Looked at the Nile and found that no woman at that point had done a full source to sea. There had been, someone who'd done from Uganda, like huge expedition to Egypt, but no one had gone from sort of what's believed to be the official source. And I just thought it was within every cell of my body. It was this real visceral response of like, that's it. I've got no idea how I'm going to do it, but I know I really want to do that. And so that's where the whole idea came from.
It's so good, like, to literally, like, you've got a history in surf lifesaving at Bondi there as a paddler. So you've got that skill down pat. But we're talking, like how many Ks all up? How many kilometers, how many miles is the Nile? And that wasn't meant to be a rap.
The spoiler alert, didn't end up doing the whole thing, but what I was looking at doing was over 6,500 Ks of paddling. It ended up being a bit of a mix. It didn't quite work out like that for security reasons, but what it was everything I was looking for.
Awesome. We'll get into it. And so, first woman to do it, correct?
Well, from the way I did it.
Yeah.
So
there's two Niles. I remember you saying last time we spoke, there's two Niles.
Yeah, you've got the Blue Nile and the White Nile. So there's the two tributaries. The Blue Nile starts in Ethiopia at Lake Tana and heads through Ethiopia and Sudan. And then the White Nile, it's still kind of debated. Does it start in Rwanda? Is it Uganda? Is it Burundi? Either way, that then comes up through Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, South Sudan, and Sudan. And then you've got the confluence of those two tributaries in Khartoum in Sudan, where they form like the Nile main. And then that goes up through Sudan, up into Egypt, and finishes at the Mediterranean.
I'm looking at a world map right there, and Africa's right in my line of sight right here. Yeah. And I'm going to pretend I know what you're talking about here when you're throwing all those towns and lakes and stuff at me. But it's that's freaking gnarly. And those places that you paddled through, I remember you having, I remember the updates. Hey, I've got the merch. I'm a fan. So getting into some of these countries was extremely, was it the Congo and all that? You had to get permission and like take through let's go back. Hang on. Trav, you're a bit excited. I've always wondered, of doing something like that myself on my bucket list, obviously. And that's why it resonates with me so much. And being an ex, clubby surf lifesaver, I can paddle, can, prone if I have to, and swim if I have to. So how do you prepare for something like that? Because one, you got logistics, you got security, you've got getting to Africa, you've got sponsorships, you've got raising money, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, this is why it took 2 years to get to the start point. I mean, initially I didn't even have the backbones of a project plan. So like I said, I do risk management and I'd also done a lot of project management. I was like, I need to get the bare bones, like the skeleton of this plan. So it's like, okay, let's start. What books are there of people who've done expeditions? So started reading some of those, Googling, and then reaching out to people. So there's a chap called Pete Meredith who'd been involved in a couple of expeditions down the Nile, supported a lot of river-based expeditions through Africa and provided risk advice. So got to have a conversation with him, which was pure gold, because he basically gave me that skeleton of things that I needed to consider. Things like the approvals and the fact, it's a completely undocumented process. There is no wiki for this. You've got to work it out. And you don't have really obvious websites for each of these countries with people to contact. It's like I said, it's this undocumented process, and you're just working it out. So trying to, get in contact with the right people and working out, am I asking for permission or forgiveness? What's the best? In every country, it's going to be a different approach. So there was a huge piece around that, organizing, working out what those approvals were. And like for one of them, to start it, Rwanda, I literally got the approvals the day before. I was in Rwanda. It wasn't like before I left Australia. This is
really.
You've got to keep moving, keep taking steps forward until someone says stop. And that goes against, like, as a project manager, you know exactly, you got everything, signed off, everyone's signed, and then you go, okay, right, we're ready for implementation.
Is it a NAT chart? Is it a NAT chart that you've got a GNA?
Chart, yeah.
I'd hate to see that chart on on this trip. That would have been a sight to behold, I'm sure.
And it was forever evolving because it was constantly learning. And this is what I loved. I hadn't expected to enjoy the journey just getting to day one. It was so valuable because I got to have conversations with people like Pete Meredith, all sorts of people. About this trip with yourself. Like, there were just so many people I would never have had the opportunity to speak to if it wasn't for this. I got to go and learn so much and go on these different courses, then getting to apply the skills which I'd always kind of not to say play down, but it's not something I talk about proudly. It's like, oh, I'm a risk manager, wow, it's such an exciting place to work. It's it can be quite a dry place, particularly when you're doing it in banking. You're the fun police. But suddenly I was applying those skills to this passion project, and it facilitated me being able to do it. Like, I did a massive risk assessment on it, and that drove a lot of my preparation. It was valuable. It created kind of like boundaries of what I was getting into, because suddenly I knew all the worst case, what worst case could be. And there was like well over 100 risks that I'd identified. And then I got to apply
100 risks.
Well over.
I know other adventurers, and they hire risk assessors and risk people as part of their team, right?
Yeah.
So you got that in house. Happy with that?
Yeah.
So
I had that, but then there were some things when I went through and did it. So I, looking at it, and like the risk of being arrested in one of these countries, even if you've done the wrong thing, like that was high. The likelihood was high, and the impact would depend on the country and, almost people's mood of the day. And I didn't know, like, there's no obvious standard operating procedures of what to do in that situation. And because it was just outside of my risk appetite, particularly given how probable that was going to be for the amount of time and the amount of countries I was going through, I didn't want to put that back on my friends or my family to try to deal with it. So I'd done hostile environment awareness training. And I then engaged a company.
Hang on, back the truck up. It's not a course that is thrown around lightly. Hostile, what did you call that?
Environment awareness training.
Wow.
So it's really understanding, like, it's sort of digging into further more into those security risks of the countries that you're going into. Looking at kidnap risk and various other things of how to keep yourself safe, as well as understanding the specifics around the risks within associated with each country, and what do if there is a kidnap, what are those processes of what to think about if that you're going through.
Sarah, how the fuck do you mitigate against that?
Well, I mean, what, against being kidnapped?
Oh, kidnapped, and let's throw another one in, hippos. Let's throw another one in. Yeah, let's throw another one in called like bribery. These sorts of things that I guess happen.
Well, if we look at, the kidnapping was things like all my social media going out had a delay on it, because obviously everyone knew where I was going. Like, no surprises there. I follow the map. Yeah. So I put a delay on things. I would make it sound like potentially there were more people with me than maybe there were. So you're just giving that perspective of not looking like a super soft target.
Okay, right.
There are certain limits as to what you can do.
So you're photoshopping people with like AK-47s and stuff next to you, and That looks like a different picture. No, they're part of my team. There's 6 of them.
It might be a lot easier to do now with AI. Like it would be
True.
really easy to Photoshop shot that stuff. So there was just, little things like that, and just being smart, being aware, and I engaged a company. So like I said, there was this company that provided the hostile and awareness training. I engaged them. They gave me someone a chap called Dave, who I checked in with daily. So I would give him an update on a 1 to 5 rating for how I was: security, health, mental state, communications, and supplies. Tell him the plan for the day. He would then give me a detailed intel report. That company also, and he was there to deal with anything crisis that came up. So should I get arrested, he would then be the person to go, right, I'll talk to, which did happen. I'll talk to the community, like DFAT,
Wow.
government agencies and intel communities. They also had a cyber team. So then the cyber team were keeping an eye out for people following me in case there was anyone dodgy. So they would look at anyone following me.
Was there?
Anyone who was,
At any point?
yeah.
Bullshit.
So we had, and they were keeping an eye also on online chat rooms and dark web. So there was like one bloke who had some form for kidnapping, who was talking about me, not in a threatening way, but the fact that he was aware of me and my expedition was a red flag. So it just meant as I was going through the area where we believed he was based, was just like, get a shifty on. I had someone who messaged me through my Facebook page.
Yeah.
And it was just a hi. And this is when I was in Sudan, and I said, Dave, look, this guy's messaged me, because there were a few names I was needed to be on the lookout for, and it wasn't one of them. And he came back and said, oh, look, Intel says he is, I can't remember what it was, ex-Libya militia rebel with extremist friends in the region.
I need to interrupt, sorry, Sarah, but listeners, I mean, watchers on YouTube right now, what you'll see is a female and a blonde female. And so listeners and watchers, you probably stand out a little bit over in Africa, just saying.
Yeah. Some people, because so many people said to me, like, are you going to dye your hair? And then I'd spoken to other people, they're like, just don't bother. Like you are going to stand out. You know, when you are on a raft going through a country where, people aren't rafting, you're standing at, the blonde hair isn't necessarily the giveaway at this point.
Yeah. The fact that you're actually on a kayak.
On a kayak in a country where people aren't kayaking on the river.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
Don't
Well,
worry
it
about
is
it.
it is one way to mitigate some degree of risk, I guess, dyeing your hair. But overall, so you've got the hotline to some dude that can just helicopter in and fix shit up?
Not quite like that, but was there, like, if we'd really needed to get an evacuation, yes, there would have been probably additional costs to sending in a team to get me. But then, when I was going through Sudan, it was when they were trying to overthrow the government there, and there was that risk of potentially things sort of more, not civil war, but the powers, like basically the situation that we're in now, where you've got the RSF and the Sudanese armed forces like fighting. There's a power play going on. And so we just always had this sort of loose evacuation plan that could then, put a lot more detail to it if things had accelerated. But it just meant I had someone who was potentially going to hear about things a little bit sooner and would be able to really quickly come up with a good plan to act on. And it gave me a huge amount of confidence, because I was a woman there, on her own, doing something, relatively high risk. Having that person and doing it, like, I've never done anything like this before, and I hadn't been to those countries really. So having someone to bounce decisions off, and knowing that there was someone there who would, if I was doing something reckless, would say, Sarah, and that's why I had to skip South Sudan, because of the intel they got, and it was a risk-based decision from me, with a recommendation that came from Dave. And it was, on the outside, it looks like it was hugely risky.
Yeah.
But what I was trying to make sure is that nothing I was doing was reckless. Yes, it was high risk, but it was calculated. It was managed as much as possible. And I was just making sure that what I was doing wasn't reckless, because I did also have local teams with me. And that was part of the de-risking on many different levels. But I had a duty of care to the people with me as well.
So how many countries did you go through?
So Rwanda, side trip to Burundi, which wasn't planned, Tanzania, Uganda, Sudan, and Egypt.
So at the border, you're picking up like a new team member and swapping out the old one. You know, who was with you on your team?
So I split it. There was sort of two main sections. There was rafting and then kayaking. So
Yeah.
Rwanda to the end of Uganda, and it had sort of close to South Sudan, was rafting. And the reason why I chose rafting is you've got white water there. I'm not a whitewater kayaker. I wasn't willing to invest the time to get up to speed to be good enough on the rapids there. You had the wildlife threats. That was another key driver with the hippos and the crocs. And I just felt, and again, this was also talking to people locally. I did a couple of recce's. That being in a raft, while it doesn't mitigate the being attacked by these river monsters, it sort of it reduces the risk, or it reduces the potential outcome. So that's why I chose to raft, and I engaged a Ugandan rafting teams, a group of guys, so 3 guys. In Ginger in Uganda, you've got a lot of commercial whitewater rafting. So I'd gone there on a recce. I knew the owner of one of the rafting companies. He very kindly provided me, Nile River Explorers, with the gear, lent me the rafting gear, and put me in touch with some of his guys. So they were local guys. So they joined me, the 3 of them, from the source Rwanda to the border with South Sudan.
Okay.
Then for Sudan, with the kayaking, I'd done a recce to Sudan and Egypt to meet local paddlers, government officials, and people from the charities I was raising money for. So I'd have a local network when I got there, and the contacts that I'd need, because I didn't have $500,000 to throw at this to have people to organize everything for me. So then I got to Sudan, met the people there, and then had local paddlers and sort of did one section and then another section. Got to Egypt, another guy had someone I'd met there from the paddling community. A guy then joined me there, and we went through and did Egypt together. So there was a lot of stops, do a section. Even that first rafting section was effectively split into 2 main bits with a break in the middle, and so on. And then you're still negotiating visas and everything else, which every country was different. When you're going through borders by river, there isn't. It was all a bit dodgy.
You don't say. We'll get to the end, but what was the gnarliest, hard in mouth kind of experience for you? The top.
There were 2. Like the big one, which I have spoken about very extensively, is being attacked by a hippo. So we had a hippo actually bite the back of the raft, and that was.
Oh fuck! Really? I did not know that. Oh fuck! Bite the back of the raft.
Yeah. Oh look, we messed up.
How is there a dude on the back of the raft with a gun or what?
No. So what happened was, the river, this was in Rwanda. This was only on day 6.
Oh. How long did it take you, by the way?
I was in Africa for 6 months, but I was definitely not paddling for anything like that. There was a lot, as I say, of stop-start. But the river where we were, it was, I don't know, maybe 50 meters, 70 meters wide. So it wasn't massively wide. You had these short, steep banks, and then it was flat, and it was very windy. So because of those banks and the fact that it was quite windy, you couldn't really see that far ahead. The way you act and I've been advised, is in hippo territory, slap the surface of the water with your paddle, and they'll pop up to see what's making the noise, because they're sleeping under the water most of the day. You see where they are, you go around them. And this was our first day in hippo territory. We'd gone around the first pod, and that had been fine. Anyway, we were then coming up to this bend. It was sort of going a left and then a right. And as we got into to start to go to the left, over in the corner, we saw a baby hippo in the shallows.
Oh, damn it.
And so we stopped paddling, but you've got the natural movement of the river, which is just carrying us forward. And I literally just got the words out of, "Where's Mum?" And we drift, and she pops up on the right, and the baby's on the left, and we've gone between.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we fucked up.
Oh, God. Fucking hell. And those,
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen hippos under a boat in the Zambezi, and they're fucking like they're huge. They're minibuses.
They're massive, and they're born angry, right? So it doesn't take much.
Born angry. Did you?
Oh,
They
so
are born.
aggressive
They wake up and choose violence. Yeah, that's for sure.
every day.
Fucking hell.
And so, you take that and then you dial it up around by sort of getting in between her and Bub. So yeah, she wasn't happy. So the way we were set up is you had a frame on the like a platform with the oars attached on the raft. So you have one of the guys, I think at the time it was Koa, who was paddling. So he's forward rowing in that sort of one or the other oar.
Yeah.
Two of us up front with a single paddle. So we're doing, almost like outrigger paddling.
Yeah.
And then there was be someone at the back chilling. So at the time it was Paolo. Paolo would have probably broken records with the leap over Koa to get to the front of the raft away from Mama Hippo. We're trying to get away from her. I didn't see it, but Koa said that she put her head under and tried to flip us. Obviously, you've got this frame, you've got barrels with food, ice, everything. It's heavy.
Right.
She couldn't. So then she had a bit of a rethink, came at us again. And I just remember feeling this like a tug on the back, almost like you pull back.
Oh my God.
And I turned round and there she was, beaten into just attached to the raft.
You got two teeth, haven't they?
Yeah, two big tasks, two very, very big tasks.
So what happened to the raft? Like, did it go under?
It's inflated. No, because it's inflated in sections. Like they're designed that if
it's sectioned off.
If a rock or something,
Fuck.
and you slice it, it will only go down in one bit. Anyway, it was a pure primal fear. You can imagine it was just like it just went through me when seeing, when she was following us and then seeing her there. But I did have one vaguely sensible thought was there's still, 2 meters of raft and Koa between me and her. So it's not over yet. Just friggin' paddle. Luckily, she let go. I don't know whether it was, feeling the air, the pop. It would have, it must have popped. She bit into it because she put a hole like this into the raft.
Oh, shit.
And she was a fair way away from the baby. We were quite close to the riverbank. So she stopped. We managed to get to the riverbank and we all just jumped out. She then backed away a little bit. And so then we unloaded the raft, which means untying everything, unload it all, pull the raft up. Some local farmers helped us. And then the boys sort of patched it. So we had the glue and luckily had the stuff that we needed to patch it. So spent about an hour or so patching it. And then the most terrifying bit was, like I said, this was day 6, day 1 in hippo territory. And I really had to do
Day 6 of 6 months. Yeah, good times.
Yeah. Do I want to, do I want to continue? And, I definitely wouldn't describe myself as particularly courageous, certainly not fearless. But I still, when I checked in with myself of do I keep going or do I stop? Like the thought of stopping, it was again this sort of visceral response. No, it's not time to stop yet. I just knew in my gut, nah, I want to keep going with this. Which to me just brought home how we will push ourselves and the lengths we will go to when we really want something.
Yeah,
it was a burning side of me, and it's like it creates this armor that protects us from all those things that happen and try and stop us or tear us down or whatever it is.
It's probably a blessing in disguise that it happened so early too, and it wised you up, and it built that armor, built resilience early, right?
It did, and we changed our plan. What was one of the guys, Peter, was exceptional at coming up with different ways of doing things. Because I've been told, this is what you do. You slap the water, you go around them. So I was like, well, I'm not going to, who am I, day 6 on an adventure in Africa? I'm not going to have any other ideas as to how to deal with this. I just follow what we get told to do. But Peter said, okay, what we'll do is if we come across any more hippos, let's stop. Let's get off the raft, get onto the riverbank and tow the raft past where we can. And I'm like, that is some genius right there. Yes, I do like the idea of putting that space between us. And within an hour, we came across, I think, Daddy Hippo, who was this bull hippo who put on, we did what Pete had suggested. This hippo put on a psychotic display. absolutely psychotic. So I feel like if we hadn't, and it's a really good point, and I hadn't actually thought of it before, but yeah, if we hadn't had that experience with that hippo,
Big one would have got you.
yeah. And he was a lot bigger. And like I say, it was psychotic, the display he put on, until he chilled out and we could put the rod past him.
You know what I would have done? I'm just thinking out loud here. So you know what I would have done? I would have paid someone literally for the next 5.5 months of the trip just to be a slapper. Just fucking constantly
with a gun behind them.
just banging the water constantly all the way through. Fuck it. That's so. Where did we end? Why did you end where you ended?
So skipping South Sudan, I had to skip because the intel that Dave got was that the authorities there were suspicious about what I was doing, which I get. You know, this is a country, or it's a country.
Next kind of this thing called war going on.
Well, they had massive internal conflict going on. The idea of doing something for fulfillment they are so far away from that, sadly, because it's a country that people are just trying to survive from one day to the next. So they were looking at going, there must be an ulterior motive. Like, why on earth would you go and do something like this?
Yeah.
So the intel was that they were potentially going to detain me, and that could have been for a day, for a week, for a month. Like, we just didn't know. And we'd been arrested and detained in Burundi. It's another long story, tricked across the border. Anyway, I'd spoken as a dual national Australian Brit. The Brits obviously have a far greater presence through Africa, for probably not great reasons. But anyway,
I think it'd be really favourable. Damn British Empire.
Yeah, so... But it turned out, it's quite handy in some cases, like when I was, when we were arrested. So the FCO had said, if anything happens to you in South Sudan, we cannot help you. Like, you are on your own there. So it was a risk, based decision and I had to sit with it and go, no, it's not worth the risk, because it's not just me this impacts.
No,
it's my family, it's the governments. I mean, yes, the FCO might not be able to do anything, but it still puts them in a position. It puts DFAT in a position, the Australian equivalent. It then has an impact to the people who want to come and do these kind of trips after me.
Yeah.
It's just, I didn't want to be that, that adventurer.
Yeah.
That goes and does that. At that point, that to me, that would have been being reckless. So then that's when I went up.
Risk to reckless. There's a ratio, I guess.
And it's very grey, and it's really hard. And sometimes you only know in hindsight, which side of that you were. And I felt, I was dancing along that line.
Yeah, it reminds me of a lot of people who summit, the big mountains around the world, and it's normally guys, and especially Mount Everest, where they get summit fever. And where base camp will say, no, don't go any further. You're burning through oxygen. You must turn around. And the ego just takes over and goes, no, fuck you. I'm like meters from the top. I can see it. And that's the thing that kills them. I was, years ago, Dad and I went to Mount Everest base camp on the Tibetan side, the North Face. And we went to advanced base camp, highest place in the world that you can trek to, and we went with a full-on expedition team. And one of the guys there was really high up in the Australian Army, or Australian Reserve, should I say. He had tried Everest before and had literally got to, he said, 300 metres, might even be 200 metres from the top of Everest. He could literally see it. But the snow was that thick and he was trudging through and just burning through oxygen trying to get to the top. And, this had been months in the planning. And base camp said, his name's Zach. Zach, you got to turn around. And he spent so much coin on it. He's got all that way. And he said, no, fuck you. And he said, well, if you take another step, you are going to die. You will not have enough to come back down. And a lot of deaths on Everest happen on the way down because they get a rush of adrenaline, they do their selfies, and their body goes into somewhat of a shock. And so Zach sat there in the snow, crying, grown man, crying, going, got to do the right thing. He turned around 200-300 meters from the top. And I might be butchering, Zach, if you're on my list and you're hearing this, please, we'll jump on and you can tell the story. But he did the right thing, and he came back a couple of years later and conquered Everest. In fact, I think he had a crack twice, but it's that summit fever where ego takes over. I'm going to be the first woman to do this, and like you could have easily done that, right? But you got to look at logic.
Absolutely. And it's really hard. Like when you've put your heart and soul and money and this pride and this ego and trying to, take all of that out and get back to being quite, objective about it. And that's why it's so important to have, like, he had that team to say no. And I had Dave there to support me. And then there was another organization I was running, occasionally doing these assessments to see, what are my decision-making skills like? Because they will take a dive as well when you are, at that point, Zach would have been, there's exhaustion as well. So you add in that tiredness onto
and your
it.
decision-making faculty.
Your decision-making skills are, they're just going down and down and down. You're sort of losing IQ points rapidly.
That's what's scared. Like I think about myself in that situation, and that's what's interesting to explore that part of your own psychology. And I don't know what I take risks on big waves, and I take risks on various things. And you could say, hey, public speaking is really risky, but you take those muscles to the gym enough, and it becomes part of you. I don't know what I'd do in that situation, and that I'm curiously excited about how I would be in that situation if I was you in that situation. I don't know whether I would have turned around or not, or would have said stop. I would, maybe the idiot ego in me would have taken over, and probably a lot of people around me would say, yeah, definitely. Whether I would have, listened to the advisors, but it's interesting. It's just interesting. I'll say that.
It is. And I think, it's something to be aware of when you're going into those things. And then it's like any risk, like, how can I mitigate that?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, who would be that trusted source that you would listen to if they said no, that you would go, oh, this hurts, but fine. What are those steps that you would put in? What is that, how the ratings, like something that you could put in place to try and protect you from you, and I think that's what we have.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Do you have any regrets?
No.
Done. Drop them on.
I mean, I can't, whether would I have done things differently. I just learned so much through it, and it made me come alive. Like the whole first thing, there were some firsts that came out of it, but it so quickly wasn't about that. Yeah. So quickly. And I realized luckily there was a lot more real intrinsic, that's very much an extrinsic motivation. Yeah. There was so much more intrinsic motivation for doing this. And that's what really came out. And it was all about the adventure and I love problem solving. I got massively over problem solving by the end of this trip. It's like, I just want to go through a day. The people are like, oh, did you get the post-adventure blues? And I was like, no. After 6 months of doing that on your own.
Cup is filled. Yep.
That was good. I went to mum's for 5 weeks in the UK, and I was happy to do nothing and just rebuild myself, my body, begin to process it all and draw out some of the lessons and the learnings and what I got out of it.
Let's talk about that. The book, on the cover of your book, it says "One Woman's Search for a Life Less Ordinary." So, question: what is an ordinary life?
For me, it was the life I had. And some people might look at it and go, maybe, that it wasn't. But like I said at the start, I felt like I was the square peg in the round hole. I would, put myself into this shape that kind of fitted the societal expectations. And it just didn't feel like it was really me. And so I didn't want that society. That's what the ordinary life was to me.
And what's a less ordinary life?
The life that I then, going on the expedition and then the adventures I've been on since, the cycling across Australia, because I did that trip, it was definitely a go large or go home. And I'm not normally that person. I had more, But it, took my comfort zone from the size of a backyard to the size of a national park. So things that would have seemed like quite a stretch weren't. So then, I finished that April, December that year. I did a solo descent of kayaking up the Murray River here in Oz. So that was about 2,500 Ks. And I had to, almost stop myself and say, Sarah, come on, not lift your game, but don't be too relaxed. Because compared to the Nile, it's like, I'm dealing with snakes.
Hippos. Remind you of hippos.
You've got, snakes, and it was during the horrendous bushfires. So there was trying to navigate that, and a few other bits and pieces. But it was just a walk in the park in comparison, so much easier, and so many lessons I was able to take. And like I say, things that would have felt like such a stretch were nowhere near as big a stretch as they would have been had I not done the Nile. Yes, if I'd done some smaller things and built up to it, I would have probably executed and done things differently on the Nile. But I'm so glad I did it, and I did it the way I did.
So scratching that itch so early has got to give you a thirst for firsts, right? So, in Ironman, what's experienced a lot from people in Ironman triathlon is Ironman hangover. You train for something so bad, so much, and so much of your life is dedicated to it. You cross it off the bucket list. And I definitely experienced this as well. And then you're like, well, I can't handle not, going for something so massive. And so how do you get back to normality, and how quickly do you just like, all right, done, I'm home now, and you start getting, that itch again? How quick does that get more and more regular, or your searches for first become more frequent?
Look, it's probably a couple of different answers to that. I knew I was going to be doing more expeditions, so there wasn't massive post-expedition blues. Like I said, I was happy to get back to some routine and some money, started writing the book. I decided pretty quickly I was going to do the Murray. So that was, 8 months later, I was doing the Murray River. Then it was like the choice was almost taken away from me, because I finished the Murray March 2020 and February, and then a month later we were in lockdown. COVID, but then managed to, because I then was getting very itchy feet, and particularly I was all stuck, not being able to go anywhere. By some miracle, I'd wanted an idea I came up with very early on in the Nile expedition, because I knew I was going to want to do more, was to cycle across Australia. And in 2021, with a friend, one of my good mates, Tara, we did exactly that. We actually managed to get into WA without having to quarantine or anything. It was like this tiny window that opened up, and we just happened to have our flights booked. We almost ran out of the airport before.
You paddled the Nile, you kayaked the Murray first, and then you cycled across Australia?
Yep. So from the most westerly point to the most easterly point, raising money.
Is that 4,700?
Well, it would be a little bit more. It would be 5,000.
Yeah.
But we ended up skipping a short section because a cyclist that we met was tragically hit and killed by a road train about an hour after we'd met him.
Yeah.
And we'd had, long conversation with him, and that it brings the risks home. It's like if you have we get in our cars and drive, and we know that there's a risk, but when you have, unfortunate enough to say, have a car accident, that every time you get in that car afterwards, you're thinking about things differently, and so we did get back on the bikes after a couple of days, and we kept going. And then we got to the border with South Australia, and we spoke to some of the truckies there to get their views on, what it's like for them, what the roads are like, how they deal with cyclists. We spoke to the police, and we just made but it was really hard. Like it felt it shouldn't be riskier than the Nile, but it felt like it was. And I actually had a conversation with Dave, who'd been my advisor on the Nile. He very kindly said, look, when you're doing this trip, if ever I can help, just let me know. And I just wanted that objective view. Like we talk about that pride and everything. And that was a real example where we were trying to raise money and have conversations about mental health. I'd say our mental health was definitely taking a dive. I couldn't get back to what my gut was saying. There was just too much emotion and tiredness and everything else. And that's when I had to speak to Dave, and Tara had someone that she could speak to. So then we came back together and said, I think let's skip this section. Let's go and cycle down through the Eyre Peninsula in South Australia, which this guy who tragically been killed, Leaf, had recommended to us. Get the confidence back and just take it one day at a time. So yeah, so it should have been 5,000, ended up being 4,700.
Were you trying to beat a record, or were literally no one had done it? No, what?
No, it had been done before. Like people had paddled the Murray before. I don't think anyone's done the Nile and the Murray, so that's sort of a first in that. But yeah, people have definitely cycled across Australia. Less people do it from most westerly to most easterly, primarily I think because the first section from Steep Point, which is the most westerly point, it's very sandy, very corrugated. You've got a few Ks of sand dunes. Yeah. It's a nightmare to get across with bikes, and particularly when you've got fully loaded bikes. There's no water anywhere.
No.
What's the
amazing? Hey, tell me so with that being said, what's next?
Well, I did beginning of this year, went to Oman and did some solo bike packing through Oman. So did just under 1,600 Ks. Sorry, 1,600 Ks there, it was more adventure holiday.
Okay.
But still, it was the first time I'd done bike packing solo, and it was quite tough to begin with because I had the flashbacks to sort of the challenges we had on the ride across Australia. But yeah, looking forward, oh my goodness, I have a bucket list with as you can just begin to imagine.
Well, hit me. What do you got?
To do?
What do you got? Maybe we could combine skills here. What's the top three?
Oh, there's more I want to do in Ocean Road. Look, it's not going to be announced yet. Because I've been basically I've been chasing that first hit.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Up the Nile. I'm wanting that. And nothing's been that first hit. And I think I've come up with something that's going to take me a few years to pull off, but it brings together a bunch of stuff I want to do. You know, I'd love to row an ocean. Well, I mean, I'm absolutely petrified at the thought of rowing an ocean. Sure. But I want to go do some more up in the Middle East. There's a paddling trip I want to do up in the Middle East. I'd love to do some more bike packing, like down through South America. And then I just saw which just looks like it's short. It's all organized, but it looks like so much fun. It's the monkey bike. Have you seen it? It's Adventure something or other. It's the monkey run.
I've heard about that. What is that? Where is that?
You're on these little monkey bikes, right? For 7 days. They give you a start and an end, and it's like good luck, and they lend you a bike. So you're on these tiny bikes. They do it in Morocco, in Peru, somewhere in the US, and I can't remember where else. It just looks absolutely hilarious. I'm like, that would be fun to go and do for a week.
How do you fund these things?
Mostly self-funded. In the Nile, I did have some sponsors come on board. So I had Shaw and Partners Financial Services very kind of came on board as my main sponsor, but it was still predominantly self-funded. I tried all sorts of things. I had a gift registry. Having never been married, I decided that this was my big day. And so for friends who might want to contribute, but sort of go, well, I don't really want to give, like cash would be a bit almost weird to give. And I don't know where it's going to start. I put out a lot of the stuff, the kit that I needed, so people could, buy the stove, buy it that way. And it made a massive difference to me, cumulatively. And it was great, to feel that I had a little bit of people sort of with me. Some friends did donate money, and it absolutely blew me away with some of the generosity of people. But it was largely self-funded. It's so hard, I think, there are so many people out there doing extraordinary things. It's hard to give a really good return on investment, I think, to the sponsors. You've really got to find a sponsor who just gets that emotionally goes, oh my God, I love this. I want to be part of it. Yeah. And that's really, in my experience, kind of what it comes down to, or having the right contacts and networks. I don't know.
So now you're out there coaching, speaking. You've got the book. You've got the thought leadership practice. What's the key message? You know, we do these things. We extract the learnings. We repackage up the learnings and the how-tos. You know, what are you trying to teach people through this lens now?
If I, boil it down to the smallest amount, it's think big, act bold, do more. Set those really big goals and dreams to act bold. And sometimes we are acting, we don't feel bold. Like we don't need to have all the answers as to how we're going to do it. And there's going to be a ton of self-doubt and all the fears to deal with. And to go and do more, to fill our lives, to, build our bucket list and work our way through it and be ambitious and be bold and to, to live this precious life that we have, for those of us who really do have this kind of opportunity, we can make things happen.
It's interesting, Tony Robbins is famous for the saying, motion creates emotion. I'm sure he got it from someone else, but motion creates emotion. So actually saying yes, committing to the first step, signing up to the thing, telling a friend, committing in some form or another, the action actually creates the psychology. Your psychology has to keep up to the action. So it's the action first, guys. It's the signing up. It's the saying yes. It's the social commitment. Maybe, one of the best ways to lose weight, funnily enough, is actually to publicly announce it on Facebook, believe it or not. No one likes social embarrassment. No one, ego is amazing when it comes to accountability. But declaring what you're going to do out there in the world like you have, Sarah, and then committing to it is, you're never going to be ready for something like that.
No, you're never
emotionally
ready till afterwards, until it's done, then you're ready. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Because there were times that if I hadn't put it out there, I would have backed down. And I knew I had to put it out there. I knew I had to create community accountability to keep me going, to get me to the start point. I knew once I got to the start point, I'd be okay, but that it was going to be such a tough haul getting there. And you don't need, like you say, you don't need to know how. You just need to take that first step of going, I want to do this, and then start. The next action is to Google, or the next action is to read a book. Like, it's really small, but when you start doing it, you create some momentum. And the other thing I'd say, particularly when it's big goals, is there are times when it can still seem so overwhelming and so far away. Like that mountain peak still looks like a long way away. But then when you stop and look at how far you've come, it's really, I find that very motivating. And I used to do all the actions that I'd done. I'd keep a log of them. And there'd be days where, I'd get to the end of the week and go, I've just got nothing done this week. And then I'd actually look back at the actions I got done in a week or a month. And it's amazing how much you can do. It's like we overestimate what we can do in a day and we underestimate what we can do in a year. And having that proof was like this, okay, it still feels like a long way, but I know I'm making progress and I know I've got momentum. I've just got to find, like, what is that next thing I can do? Like, there's a million things I can do. What do I want to do? Right? Just keep moving.
Yeah, someone famously said, again, I don't know the author, but how do you climb Mount Everest? Take the first step.
One step at a time. It's
'cause you can't guesstimate what's going to happen on the second or the third or the fourth step because of the elements, right? You just have to front up and take the first step and see how it goes. You can't reverse engineer everything's going to happen. So
no,
I guess that's the message there, guys, is how can you commit? How can you take that first step? What's the like 1% like little action that you can take towards your bucket list item, towards a big adventure in your life, some risk, whether it be in life, like paddling the Nile, whether it be a bucket list item, or even just in business or in your career, in relationship or your health. What's that little 1% of something that you can do today, right now, when you listen or watch this podcast? What's that little 1%? So when you get to the end of the day, then end of the week, you've got this cumulative total of these little 1%ers, and that's how they say it, that's how you win a footy game. It's the little 1%ers that make the 100% of change, right? And so, Sarah, your bucket list must be absolutely crazy. What is a bucket list life to you then?
For me, it is again, it almost comes back to that master message of think big, it's coming up with the ideas and not playing small. Like, it's like, look at it. It's like, well, how could I go larger? How could I 10x? It's like, don't limit yourself by your current capabilities, your current financial situation, whatever it is. Like, just to not take those limits off and to think bigger, because then you'll come up with all these different ideas of things you want to do. And, then some of the smaller things will seem so much easier once you've come up with a massive idea. Like, other ideas are a lot more achievable. And then, committing to, picking something and committing to it and taking that first action. And also, one thing I do think is also drawing out, when you do these things and you achieve it, draw out some of the learnings from it. And we can be very much, particularly if you're that A-type personality, like, great, done that. Next, what's next?
Yeah.
And not drawing out some of that experiential gold that comes from it, and banking that stuff, like the David Goggins cookie jar and all of those lessons and learning and taking time to reflect. That's why writing the book for me was so valuable. There were times where I was just like, I missed some sections. It wasn't that big a deal. And I, particularly as women, we downplay, we tend to, and I'm generalizing here. So apologies for those that it doesn't apply to, but we tend to downplay our achievements and we rip ourselves off from the confidence we could be giving ourselves, that self-confidence to go and do the bigger thing. If we're constantly telling ourselves what we didn't do or, it was nothing, it's like, learn from the guys and do a bit of chest beating, even if it's just to yourself. Do a bit of chest beating.
That's also an Australian and British tall poppy syndrome thing. Let's just call it that. That we've got, right. We sort of self-sabotage our own success to a certain extent by downplaying things so no one will cut us down. Different in America and other parts of the world, that's for sure. Hey, look, on the book, how can people get in contact with you and how can people get a copy of your book?
Thanks. Well, it's on Amazon, Paddle the Nile. So it's a nice, simple title. You can remember that one, by Sarah Davis. So it's on there in paperback or ebook version. There's my website, sarahjdavis.com, on Instagram, which is really the only social media platform that I'm active on. I'm on there as Sarah Paddles. But if anyone wants to, ask any questions or drop me an email, sarah@sarahjdavis.com. So if there's anywhere I can provide any advice or support, give me a shout.
Good stuff. And we'll be sharing all of those in the show notes, those connections. And please reach out to Sarah if you've got a crazy idea. One that involves,
I want to hear it.
One that involves hippos. She's got that down pat. Sarah, any last thoughts, last words you want to say before we sign off?
No, just do it. Bucket listers, pick something and just do it.
Love it. Thanks heaps, Sarah. Thanks for jumping on the Bucket List Life podcast. Guys, don't forget to subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Give it a thumbs up on the socials and, keep spreading the love. Thanks heaps, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to the Bucket List Life podcast with the world's #1 bucket list expert, Trav Bell. For more great content, go to www.thebucketlistguy.com. We'll see you next time.